Hi there. Welcome to the Sober Circle channel. Enjoy this speaker tape.
We are experimenting a little bit this morning. Let's be honest about the thing. You know, you have to be honest in this program if you're going to stay sober. I'm a professional speaker, so I'm very conscious of a lot of things. First of all, I'm conscious of the fact that we have many who want to make tape recordings, and I told them to wait for my signal before they start the recording. Those tapes generally run 45 minutes. There was a time that I was known as the man of a few thousand words. There's that element of wanting to know whether you can be heard all over the place. I don't like to fool around with the microphones after I once get to speaking, because there's nothing that so detracts the attention from what you're saying as if you're being preoccupied with doing other things. And so then somebody in the coffee room over there in the very last row, can you hear me? Anybody, just raise your hand. You can hear me plain and clear, so that takes care of that. Our acoustics are perfectly in order. May I just say that I have been to many, many conventions on the state and on the regional level, and you don't go to any of them which you do not enjoy. If you do not enjoy them, it is only because you didn't bring anything there with you to make it enjoyable for you. But I think that Eve will agree with me, and we've been on some of these together. This has been about as well an organized convention as it has ever been my privilege to attend. The groundwork for it has been magnificent. The caliber of the program, the quality of the speakers have been outstanding. If you leave here hungry, it's only because you yourself are insatiable. Now, the bouquets have been passed out, but personally for my wife and myself, I want to extend this word of gratitude of saying that I'm indebted to Jack Schiebler for never having been made more comfortable and more welcome any place than I was here at the Sheraton Gibson. I want to extend my personal thanks to all the committee members who have left nothing undone to make this stay here as enjoyable as any I have ever been privileged to attend. I only hope that in some small measure I too can make some contribution to this great convention to justify their faith in me and having summoned me here to this meeting. And I'm delighted to be with you. You know, there's always a question in a speaker's mind when he's chosen to be the last one. I've always tried to figure that out, and I've come to the solution. By the time the last speaker speaks, this whole affair is either such a huge success, there's nothing that he can do to louse it up. Or it's such a dismal flap he can't save it. And so I'm tremendously happy this morning because this is such an overwhelming success. It really doesn't make much difference. All right. But this is a very humbling experience to me. A very humbling experience. Next Sunday at this hour I shall be standing in my pulpit. My name is Leon Whitley. In the fraternity, I'm better known as Dutch Butch. I'm a Methodist minister. I haven't always been a Methodist minister, but I am now. by the grace of God. We use that word grace of God so loosely so often, don't we? We don't really know what we actually mean so many times. Take this morning, for instance. I could have made things awful tough for this committee. There, of course, is that lack of humility coming through again. But a week ago today, I was hopelessly flat on my back with a severe attack of arthritis, which for no reason at all chose to seize me 10 days ago. And there I laid on my bed and picked up the long-distance phone. I called up the Pittsburgh area and told them, well, you better call off the Tuesday night affair because I just simply can't make it. If I don't improve quickly, I'll have to go to the hospital. And Elsie, that's my better half. Believe me, my much better half. So what are you going to do about Cincinnati? I said, I'll wait until Wednesday. Normally, I ought to be able to judge by that time whether or not I'm able to go. If this repeats itself as it has in previous years, I should be ambulatory by then, and if I can walk or get to the doctor's office on Wednesday, I can get to Cincinnati by Sunday. And so let's not call Lance Skinner up and give him butterflies and DTs now. Let's wait. So Thursday morning, by the grace of God, I was able to get on the road and come up here, and here I am, and I'm delighted to be with you. This is an humbling experience. As I said, next Sunday I'll be in my pulpit talking to my faithful 80 sheep. Some goats. But this morning I have this privilege to address this convention, and let me be honest again, I had not anticipated this turnout. Sitting way out there yesterday, yes, certainly, but this Sunday morning deal normally isn't the most enthusiastically attended. Then also on the other hand, and on the black side of the ledger, so many of us have advanced to the place where Sunday morning has become for us an hour of worship, where we go to our individual churches. And that generally reduces the size of the Sunday morning meeting. And I said last night to one of the chairmen, I said, if we could get some sort of word around to our beloved friends here that they're not going to miss their worship meeting tomorrow morning, for it's going to be a worship service. My assignment to this convention is to speak to you on the spiritual part of our AA program. This is an humbling experience for me, very much so, in that so many friends have come, many of them this morning, simply because they knew I was going to speak. And they had heard me before. It's a very humbling experience that I'm going to give you a sermon, which I've been requested to give you by those who have heard it before at Blackstone. And without trying to do any promoting here, which is the most difficult job for an architect not to do, because that's the way we used to keep drinking after our money had gone. Then we had to depend on the powers of promotion, which were very good for a long time until we were discovered. So many people have asked me about what is this Blackstone we hear so much about. This is the highest level of advanced AA. I say this advisedly. Only those who have been there know what it is. Many have been asked to explain it, but you cannot explain it. It defies explanation. May I only say it is a gathering of, and we are going to have to reduce it to 250 because of the facilities we have there, who gather there in a fellowship that begins on Friday noon and lasts through dinner on Sunday, in which we're all together in one place, an old, once deserted Methodist college for girls, which we have rehabilitated along with ourselves, and made it an assembly center, which we're using twice a year in April and in October. There we meet and we stay on the grounds. It is the equivalent of a mediocre hotel as far as that's concerned. It's an old dormitory, and you know exactly what old college dormitories were. And there we stay together. There's no occasion for us to leave at any time. And from Friday noon on, or in the afternoon on, until Sunday, we are together in that place in the most wonderful spirit of fellowship that anyone has ever known. And the only thing I can say is this. There have been some thousands of people have come since we began this 3 years ago. Many hundreds of them came there dry and left there sober. There's a lot of difference between being dry and being sober. You can quit drinking in this program, but you can hate every minute of it. You can be sober in this program and enjoy every breath you take and every minute of life. And until you get the whole thing, you haven't got it, you see. Until you get this whole program, all of it, you're not going to be completely happy in it. There are going to be elements of doubt and fear. These fears we've heard talking about. There's that insecurity, the lack of sureness. Till you get the spiritual program too, you haven't completed your recovery, so to speak. And so in Blackstone, we have this. I just wanted to give you two brief examples, and then we'll go on to the business at hand. Last April, for instance, when we had our retreat, Mary from Charlotte came up to me, and I don't know, many of you must have met her. She is so ebullient that if you once meet her, you'll just never forget her. That's all there is to that. And we AAs have taken as one of our projects there, which of course figures, one of the rooms, and we made it a coffee lounge. And we did this in typical AA style. All we wanted was a modest coffee lounge. That was what we thought we wanted. When we got through last April, we discovered that we had created a $10,000 room in that place. Now, it does defy description, but we had some AA decorators in there, and we gave them this assignment and that assignment. We said, now look, boys, we're going to spend $3,500 on the thing. Let's sort of keep it within the confines of the money we've allocated for the thing. And we turned it loose on them. Some people never learn, you know. We came back last April, and the Board of Trustees met. That's the AA trustees of the Blackstone Retreat met, and we came back, and they gave us a bill for $10,000. But we didn't care. We signed a note for it and let it go, and we do it. We'll pay it sometime. Our credit is good. But it was up in this coffee room that Mary came up to me and said, ooh, Dutch, you got to pray for me, you got to pray for me, you got to pray for me. I got two people here. Ooh, they hate me. This is their second meeting. They made one meeting, and now I brought them to Blackstone, and they didn't want to come, but I made them come, and ooh, they just hate me, and they hate everybody, and there they are. There I saw a man and his wife sitting on the sideline, and boy, she wasn't kidding. She wasn't kidding. They sat there and they did. They hated each other. They hated themselves. They hated everybody in there. They just hated the very thought of having to take the next breath. And this was on Friday. And we had Friday night and Saturday. And Sunday morning, we reached this point at which we are now. This was not at all intended 3 years ago when we began this retreat, that we would close with a worship service on Sunday morning. We were just going to have a more or less serious speaker on Sunday morning. But by dint of circumstances over which we had no control, and this certainly is the divine hand that is in this and undergirds this entire AA program, it just so developed that Tommy Lovin and myself were elected to bring the last Sunday morning messages. Each allocated a half an hour, more or less. And this has become an institution. No one has permitted any deviation from that. And so every Sunday morning we close the Sunday morning service. And one of the most amazing things was that we had a brainstorm a year and a half ago. We said it was October. And the first Sunday in October is Worldwide Communion Service throughout the world. And Tommy said, now there's no reason in the world. He said, we're both ordained ministers. Why don't we serve communion to the people here? We don't want them to miss that. And so going out on a limb, so to speak, on Saturday night, I went over to the manager of the Blackstone retreat there and said, you have the elements here for communion? He said, yes. Well, I said, let's set them up tomorrow morning. And so we announced it. Now, if you want to have a real spiritual experience, come to one of those 7 o'clock Sunday morning communion services at Blackstone, where you see Jew, Protestant, and Catholic, 180 of them coming down in the communion of Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, church got a lot to learn from us. We'll get around to that in a minute. Then at 10 o'clock we meet for our services, and then I bring a message and Tommy brings the message. It was after this that I went up in the coffee lounge to drink coffee when this woman, who Friday at noon sat there, hating every moment of it, just pushed her way through the crowd, tears streaming out of her eyes. She came up and said, oh, Dutch, I just can never tell you what this has meant to me. This morning I found what I thought I never would find in all my life, which is all by way of leading us into what I'm saying this morning. There is a level in Alcoholics Anonymous that transcends our just wanting to be sober. There's a level we're reaching for, consciously or subconsciously. St. Augustine, I think, said it many, many centuries ago when he said that our hearts are not at rest until they are at rest with Thee. We do not find our complete sobriety. We do not find our complete happiness and joy until we have reached that level of spiritual living where we're at peace with God. Because until we are, we can't really be at peace with ourselves, and we might as well face it. And so I said it's an humbling experience to have been asked to give this same talk on the road to Jericho here for you this morning, and I'm just delighted to do that. It's a rather heartbreaking experience to walk around the country and to speak here and there, and I'm sure that Eve and some of us who are in contact so much when we have this experience of finding groups that are disintegrating. They've lost their dynamics, they've lost their power. And then we find out why. It's so obvious. And I hope that what I say here will be received in the spirit in which I say it, and that some of you who may be seeing these danger signs, which already have been mentioned here, will take note of them and guard against them before your groups fall into the same pitfall. And that's when we cease to be AA groups and we start becoming clubs. Tommy and I spoke in Tampa, Florida this February, and it was a heartbreak to us. Knowing what was happening there so flooded me that I was just handcuffed. I didn't talk. I rambled for 45 minutes without actually saying anything, because subconsciously I saw these 450 people sitting in front of me, knowing that this was the end of that particular group. Because the following morning they were initiating a new program. They were now going to be a club. The rooms upstairs had been donated to them by the Miller High Life people. And so out of respect and gratitude, they were going to call it the High Life Club. With a $5 initiation fee and $2 a month dues, etc., etc., ad infinitum, ad nauseum, and then you can close the book. The same thing was happening in Petersburg. The same thing is happening here and there, and it's pitiful. I was thrilled here Friday night when I heard one of the panel members, whose name escapes me for the moment. Now it was Dick from Middletown, telling about his own club going through that same experience when he finally said, now today we have a filing cabinet. What have we got in the filing cabinet? Lists, statistics? No. He said in the top drawer we've got some AA literature, in the second drawer we got a coffee pot. That's all you need. That and the spirit. When we start departing from these 12 traditions, and when we neglect the 12 steps, we are leaving the program. And that's what we've been doing so much. We have been going off on tangents, each one having his own idea. Now, I completely agree with Hank Grimey. I mean, there are other ways in the world to get sober. And that's perfectly all right. More power to you, and God bless you, and be you just as happy as you will. But let's say this one thing. For us who are on AA, this is our program. Don't louse it up. Don't like it, get out, but don't change it for us. This is the way we want it. You keep your groups on that level and you don't have any trouble. And you will remain the power in your community to help other people. And yet the group is not complete until it lifts up and embodies within its meetings, within its concept, within its living, that element which we call, each in its own language, the higher power. And you know, we are the only people in the world who have to designate that. God isn't interested in how you call him or what you call him or how you think of him. He isn't the least bit concerned about that. It's just a lot of little men, little people, standing in their pulpits on Sunday morning, playing God, take upon themselves the authority to sit in judgment over men's lives, to tell men what to do and what to think and how to think it. And so we have an awful lot of these awful little people trying to play God. Now, preach a sermon, it's customary to read a scripture first. And in the New Testament, at least, there are two original AA stories. Perhaps nobody ever thought of them like that, but there are. I've chosen one of them this morning. For those of you who want to look it up sometime after this meeting is over with, you can go in the Gospel of Luke and look in the 10th chapter, begin reading in the 25th verse, and you'll read these words. And he, seeking to justify himself, said to Jesus, "Now who is my neighbor?" And Jesus said, "A certain man was walking down the road from Jerusalem to Jericho when he fell amongst the thieves, who stripped him, beat him, left him lying for dead in the road. Now by chance a priest was going down the same road, and seeing the man lying there, passed by on the other side. So likewise a Levite, when he came the way, saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was, and seeing the man lying, had compassion upon him, went down, bound up his wounds, poured in wine and oil, loaded him on his own beast, took him to the nearest inn and cared for him. And on the following day, he went to the innkeeper, and he gave him 2 denarii, and he said to him, "Here, take care of this, my friend. When as I pass back by this way, if it cost aught else, I will pay you." "Now," said Jesus, "who proved me a neighbor to the man who was lying in the road?" And the scribe said to him, "He who shewed mercy." And Jesus said, "You are right. Go thou and do likewise." I think this is the first story, a story of the first 12-step call that was ever made. And the other one you'll find in Luke 15. It's the story of the prodigal son. We're concerned this morning with this story, with this parable that Jesus told of the Jericho road. Now, it's a parable. A parable is a story that is related to true life. The characters, as we would say today, the names of the characters have been changed to preserve their anonymity. But the event actually relates itself to something that is true to life. It did not have to happen, but it is an illustration of what might have happened. And this Jericho road about which Jesus talked is a very real thing. It's just as real as it can be. Geographically, historically, and socially, it is an actual true relation. Jerusalem lies some 2,800 feet above sea level. Jericho down in the valley, close to the Dead Sea. The road winds leisurely down the mountainside to Jericho. It's a road that's widely traveled by a lot of people. The caravans used it in their traversing of Palestine as they thought to make contact between the south of Egypt and the northern part of Assyria, Damascus, northern Asia. But going from Jerusalem to Jericho, it was a comfortable road to travel. It went downhill. We all know how easy it is to walk downhill. You know, you start to go uphill, you haven't gone but just so far, and then you start puffing and hawing, stopping for breath and so forth and so on. But downhill, it's easy. And so lots of people took this road to Jericho. Now, in our own life, this road is just as real. Perhaps we've never thought of it that way, but it is. It's as easy, this attractive road that has a beginning, but has a false ending. We enter upon it in the best of spirits with the very best of intentions. We have no ideas and no illusions that anything is going to happen to us. Now, the road of Jericho, Jesus said, was a road that was a favorite hangout for robbers. The two men that were nailed on the cross alongside of him on Calvary's Hill were robbers, murderers who had waylaid people, which was one of the most vicious crimes even in that era of our life, of our history, this waylaying of innocent people on the road to Jericho. If you traveled down in the caravan or in the company of other people, you were pretty safe. If you went down that road by yourself, you took your life in your hands. The robbers were lying in ambush, waiting to fall upon you and to pounce upon you. Well, this road to Jericho that you and I have traveled, and you'll agree with me before I'm through that we have, it's just as dangerous and it's just as full of robbers. Now, we don't have any trouble protecting ourselves from the overt and the obvious robbers. Our police departments, our state police, our militia, they protect us from the open and overt criminal. We don't have to worry about him. We can take care of him. Someone once said, Lord, protect me from my friends so I can take care of my enemies myself. But these latent, these hidden dangers that we have to be afraid of. These robbers on our own Jericho road, whom we do not discern until sometimes it is too late. What are they? Well, first of all, there's the robber of dishonesty. Dishonesty in commercialism. You know, when you drive across the country, it's ridiculous. You watch your television, it's ridiculous. You listen to your radio, it's ridiculous. The gullibility with which we are being assessed by the manufacturers. Everybody's going to save your money, everybody's going to let you grow to be 150 years old. I've got a washing machine, buy it, I'll guarantee you live 20 years more. You've got 20 washing machines in the house already, but if I'll give you a written guarantee that if you use my washing machine, you got 20 years to add to your life, you'll buy it. If you never use it, just so you have it. Bring slits. Get up in the class. Well, we know about that. Fleischmann's gin. The liquor of distinction. You know, the only reason I ever bought Fleischmann's gin was to leave it sitting around the house where my wife could find it and hide it so she wouldn't bother the bourbon that I was drinking. But that's the way it goes, this honest commercialism. One of the robbers on the road to Jericho, which we've got to travel sometime sooner or later in life. There's a dishonesty of our society. which makes demands upon us, which demands and commands us to be conformists. You want to be one of us, you have to do like we do. We'll reject you. There's a dishonesty of our own self. The false ambitions, the false objectives, the false motives. This pride, vanity, this competitive spirit of keeping up with the Joneses, this egotism, this arrogance, these complexes which we evolve. Robbers lying on the road of Jericho in ambush, waiting for their first opportunity to pounce upon us, to beat us, strip us, and then depart from us when they think we're dying and lying on the road. You know, the amazing thing about this man in the story and the parable is that that can be anybody. Anybody. I want you to notice the tendency of this parable. Everybody is cataloged. Everybody is characterized. We know everything about everybody in the story except one person. The priest is defined, the Levite is defined, the Good Samaritan is defined. The only thing we don't know anything about is the man who was set upon by the robbers and left lying for half dead. He can be anybody. We know nothing of his nationality. We know nothing of his religious faith. We don't know who he was. Jesus, can you see the poignancy of Christ's teaching? Everybody is there but the man on the road. Who is he? He's your neighbor. And he can be anybody. Well, let me tell you maybe just a little bit, in case you have some doubts about this Jericho road of your own, let me tell you a little bit of my own Jericho road. I started out in 1930 in Detroit. Innocently, happily, without any evil intentions. At a time when I ought to have taken advantage and exploited an opportunity which comes so rarely to people. I was born in Germany, placed in an orphanage at the age of 6, not because I had neither father nor mother. I didn't have any father. They tell me that my father died when I was 9 months old of acute alcoholism. That became a great help to me later in life because it was a crutch I could lean on very nicely. Nobody blaming me for it. After all, my old man died a drunk. I inherited it. But because my mother didn't have time for her only child. And then like Keith last night, some uncles and some grandparents came to the rescue and said, well, let's don't put him in the orphanage. Let's at least put him in a good boarding school where he can get a good education. And so they took me out of the orphanage and put me in a good boarding school, and then they put me in a better boarding school, and a better boarding school, and a better boarding school, until at 15 years I had 2 years college credits, and World War I was over with. I'm 51 years old. Quit guessing, will you, please? And World War I was over with, and there was nothing left over there. Some shoemaker by the name of Eber thought he was going to be president of Germany, and I said, oh, no, I've had it. And I caught myself a handful of tram steam, and I came to the United States. I didn't bother with the red tape of immigration laws and this and that. Why use that when there was a shortcut? And 22 years later, I had to make the thing legal. Primarily because I wanted to keep my wife honest. You see, Whitley wasn't my name at all until the court made it Whitley by court action. But let's don't go into that detail now. All my life, all my youth, I look back upon, I was rejected. Mother didn't want me. These people didn't want me. I was the almost man. Constantly rejected, Started a million things and never finished any of them until came to Detroit and had the most brilliant opportunity with Chrysler. Went to Detroit City College and completed my education as an engineer. But that's when I got into this. That's when I started on the road to Jericho, innocently. No intentions. Confidently. I had every right to be. I was on the road to success. It was prohibition year. Remember those days in 1930, 31, 32? People weren't supposed to drink, and that's the reason they drank. Detroit was the place you could get liquor. Don't kid yourself. They drank for two reasons. First of all, when you're in Rome, you do as the Romans do, and the Romans in Detroit were drinking whiskey, homemade beer. Believe me, they knew how to make it, and they knew where to get it. They drank it because the law said, "Thou shalt not drink." It's illegal. Now, that's all you've got to say to some of us, and then we've had it. Let's face it. One thing we all have in common, and that is that we are diametrically opposed to all authority and from any quarter. A stop street, a red light, the wife saying you've had enough. You know, there's a story of this cartoon painted this so beautifully of the end of the world. And there was a picture of a jet pilot flying across the world, and beneath him nothing is but devastation. The captain gave it to indicate that it was the end of an atomic war. He was the last man alive, and in the next picture he dives in the ground and kills himself, and this is the end of all life. In the next picture there's a little monkey sitting up in a tree, and he's looking this scene over, and he's desolate. And he's hungry. In the next picture, a little girl monkey spots him sitting up there, and she analyzes him perfectly. And the next picture, she comes back and she has an apple in her hand. She's coming up to this monkey sitting up there so hungry, and she gives him the apple, and he looks at her. She says, "Oh, for heaven's sake, don't start that thing all over again." Diametrically, we are opposed to all authority from any quarter, and that's one of the reasons we drank. I drank. I used to make a game of it. There was an outfit in Detroit. I don't know the number anymore. It isn't important anymore. Thank you. It isn't important anymore. But they used to guarantee you 5-minute delivery service any place in Detroit, and the whiskey free if they didn't deliver it within that given length of time. And I used to have a lark on Saturday nights. I'd go over down to Jefferson Avenue, all the way outside Jefferson Avenue. I'd call up from there. And then I'd go dash in the car, go over to Highland Park and call up from there. And then I'd go over to Dearborn, I'd call up from there. And I don't care where I called, within 5 minutes they had it there. And I got gloriously plastered, but it was just a lark. I did it only as an experiment, you see. I wanted to see if I could one time get one for nothing. But boy, what organization. They really had it. This is an insidious thing. This is an insidious thing. That's as innocent. That's how innocently we started. Of course, then also came the times when I didn't show up for work. Those were just normal hangovers. I mean, we inexperienced drinkers get them once in a while. But they began to increase a little bit. And then I did a very imprudent thing. I was an engineer with Chrysler, and I bought a packet. And those people were so unreasonable about that thing. And on one of these Monday mornings, when I wasn't feeling the good, I told them exactly what I thought of them, thought of their product, and their job, and what they could do with it, and they did it. But that didn't bother me. That didn't bother me at all. There were other people needed my talents. Besides, I had some other ambitions I had to fulfill first. As long as I was loose for a little while, why not realize the ambition of learning to fly and become a pilot? That's something I always wanted. So I went out to Monroe, Michigan, and Al Hoffman and I started out there together. I just know there's some people from Monroe here, but you wouldn't recognize that little old field anymore that we had back there in 1932 or 33. I'm sure it's a great big airport now. It was just a little green pasture then. We had 3-4 airplanes out there at Monroe, Michigan. You might remember a Chinaman that killed himself on the airport there when he spun in. It wasn't our fault, please believe me. We gave the guy 85 hours dual instruction. And we told him he would never learn how to fly, but he bought an airplane and he spun in. But that was my... I started learning to fly, and I accomplished that. I got my commercial pilot's license. Single engine land. I never quite completed it, you see. It was only recently that I had the privilege and the pleasure of flying a DC-3. That's when I was speaking in Washington. I was kind of bored, and I sent the steward up in front with my license. Asked the captain if I can come up front. I'd like to see the instrument panel. And instead of that, the captain came back and said, "Come up in front and fly it a while." Well, I used to have to wash dishes once in a while for my meal. I didn't know how I had to fly a DC-3 to Washington to pay my way up there, but it's one of the thrills. But I realized that, and then we went out barnstorming. That's how I came to be introduced to the South. We came down here, and of course this is corn liquor country down here. Let me tell you, boys and girls, something. I mean, just take my word for it. Don't go backtrack. If you haven't made this experience before, take my word for it, accept it, and forget it. But if you've ever drank any of the real charred corn liquor down south, there's nothing the ABC store or the whiskey store has got to offer can even touch it. They're going to have to change tape, so I'm going to wait just a minute and go ahead and change it. Come on, reminds me of the story I've always got to tell when I have that many people. I told you I was in the Methodist Church, and in the Methodist Church we have a sort of an episcopacy like we have in many other churches. And one of our officers in the church is a district superintendent. And this story relates itself to a district superintendent in Texas. He came to a town where they're going to have a hanging. You ready? But don't record this. Where they're going to have a hanging, and the felon up on us to hang him. Sheriff said to the, and he just stood. This district superintendent stood there on the periphery of this crowd, and finally he couldn't stand it any longer. He elbowed his way all the way through the crowd, got up to the scaffold, and he said to the sheriff, "I heard what you said. I heard you told me you had a half an hour to speak here to this crowd, 20,000 people. I never had that many people in my life to preach to." He said, "Now, if he doesn't want to use the half an hour, how about giving it to me?" So the sheriff looked over at the fellow and he said, "Well, you heard what he said, what do you want to do about it?" And the criminal looked at the sheriff. He says, "You want to let him speak?" He said, "Yeah." But he said, "How about hanging me first? I heard him before." Well, this flying venture of mine took me, as I said, into the South and introduced me to corn liquor. But there is a silver lining to every cloud. it also introduced me to the most wonderful girl I ever met in the world. And I yet had not quite reached that stage where I was too undependable. I had reached the stage, although of course I never admitted it, where I couldn't drink, but and control it, where when I began drinking, I drank too much. But I met my wife, one of these freak accidents that you have in flying. The propeller got bent a little bit, and while we had to wait for our propeller to be repaired, I had nothing else to do, and so I courted her and married her, and the poor girl didn't know what she was doing. Can't hold that against her. But God bless her soul, she stuck with me. It wouldn't be for her, I don't know that I'd be here today. But with the family coming, it required me to settle down, put my roots in the ground, as it were, and I went back into the engineering business, and I went with General Motors. Then, first I worked at Washington, and then I was set up in Portsmouth, Virginia. That was the beginning of the end. I didn't know it then, but it was the beginning of the end. From now on, it was rapidly down. Now, there's one thing I'm not going to do, and I don't think it's necessary. I'm not going to stand here and give you a blow-by-blow account of every drinking bout I've ever had. I don't think there's anything gained by that. I realize that when we first come to this program, it's good to discuss these things and to get them out of our system, but that's not the program of AA. And these sordid details, for one thing, no honest alcoholic can tell you his whole story. It's absolutely impossible. You can't tell what you did during those weekends or weeks of blackouts, can you? There are so many things that a merciful God erases from your memory that you've forgotten about, or the harshness of it has been dimmed. And some of them are so sordid that you don't want to tell them. You couldn't tell them in a mixed audience, and so I'm not going to tell the whole story. It isn't germane to what I'm doing. The point I'm making up is that after 18 years of continuous traveling down the Jericho road, I eventually arrived at the place where the rest of us arrive at, and that is in Skid Row. Now, we don't all lay in Skid Row and the Bowery or in the Loop or in 5th Street in San Francisco. Or every city has its physical Skid Row, but Skid Row primarily is a state of mind. Skid Row primarily is a state of mind. It's when you reach that place where you've given up, where you can't even will to wish anymore. You can't even will to wish anymore to get sober or to quit drinking. You've just given up on yourself. And so at long last I had reached my point, lying on this Jericho road of my own, bleeding to death, unemployable, drunk out of my own business, lost everything in the world I've ever had, my character, my interest in life, my self-respect, my will to live, failed at several suicide attempts, I guess for the same reason that most of us failed at them, either stupidity or cowardice, or that there was a power that had different plans for me, but couldn't materialize those plans until I personally had the experience to back them up. I've long ceased questioning the will of God. Man that spoke to you last year at this convention just wrote a wonderful book, First Thoughts of the Life of the Spirit, in which he makes this statement. He says that humanity is divided into two parts. One part comes to God and says, thy will be done. And the other part to whom God says, all right then, thy will be done. And so until we've got to this place to where we know what we want and what we want to do about it, we don't really know what our objectives in lives are. But I had run the string out. It was all over with. And the people who knew me best and were best qualified to judge had given me 2 weeks at the outset, at the most, at the maximum, in which they would have to do one of two things with me. Either confine me as a wet brain to an insane asylum. I don't mean a drying up station. I'm talking about locking me up and throwing the key away, a wet brain, or I would succeed by going off the Portsmouth Bridge with a stone around my neck and going in the Elizabeth River. The only thing I had left in this world was my wife and my lovely children, and God only knows why they stuck. But they did. Well, now you see, lying out there on the Jericho road, set upon by the robbers and the thieves who fell upon us and beat us and robbed us and left us lying for dead, we need help. We need help. Jesus said that man was laying there and he needed help. And the first agency we would look to for help is the one we had the least interest in most of our life, and that's the church. God. That's what Jesus was saying. Now, a priest by chance was coming down the way, and the priest in Jesus' time was the church. He was the representative of the organized synagogue. He represented the church. That's the parable here. Priest was coming down the road, and seeing the man lying there, he passed by on the other side. You know, it's been quite a problem, quite a project to be a minister in Alcoholics Anonymous. Tommy and I have had a rough time of it. Now, I'm not feeling sorry for myself. We're the happiest people in the world now. But we were the oddballs. You wouldn't have done this 5 years ago, what you're doing this morning, and you know it. 10 years ago, you'd have taught and feathered you out of an AA meeting, or else they'd all got up and walked out and left you stand there talking to yourself. No, one of them sky pilots going to preach to us, eh? Not for me. If you went around amongst your brethren in the ministry and acknowledged to them that you were an alcoholic or a drunk, huh? It was kind of tough. And we've been going around in recent years holding these clergy workshops in which we're trying to help our fellow ministers to a deeper understanding of this problem of alcoholism, getting rid of some of their prejudice and some of their biases. Slowly we're succeeding. I'll tell you, it's a tough wall to crack through. You talk about your iron curtain. This ecclesiastical curtain is a pretty rough thing to get through sometimes. But we're succeeding. And let's don't condemn the church because, after all, we are guilty. It's our fault. It's our fault. It's only been, as I said, until you get the full program that you realize your own responsibility. Instead of finding so much fault with the church, why don't you get into the church and help it and make it a better place? Why don't you go to your pastor and tell him who you are and let him help you with these problems and let you help him with the problems that he has, you see? It's so easy for us. And we've got to watch ourselves about the thing about going around just pointing our finger and say, oh, you did wrong, and oh, you ought to do this way. Never mind you. What am I doing? But the fact still is that the one agency to which we would look first was the one that had least interest in us. Oh, why don't you quit drinking? Hell, if we knew how to quit drinking, we didn't need him to tell us that. But here they were with their stock answers and their and their pat little platitudes. It didn't help us. We were still lying in the Jericho road bleeding to death. And Jesus said the priest came by, the church came by and passed them by on the other side. This drunk we had nothing to do with. Pitiful. Rule Howe wrote a book a few years ago, Man's Need and God's Action. And in it he paints this picture of the church. He's an Episcopal priest, and a great one. And one of his chapters, he gives this illustration of the failure of the church to respond to the need of man. And he tells this illustration of this little 10-year-old girl who's having one of her temper tantrums. Now, all of us who have little 10-year-old girls know what temper tantrums are. And this girl, in this temper tantrum, runs upstairs. Her mother sends her upstairs to the room. And as she goes in there, she sees her mother's party dress that she had made herself lying on the bed. It was a beautiful creation. And mother was going to wear to the party that night. And the first thing the girl saw was the scissors still laying there. And so in this fit of temper, she takes the scissors and she cuts mother's dress all up. A little while later, mother comes up to the room. Of course, the first thing she spots is that dress laying there. And then she reacts like any other woman does. She breaks out and sobs and crying and throws herself across the bed and just cries and cries and cries. And finally, she feels a little tug on her sleeve, and the 10-year-old girl is over there and says, "Mother." But mother just keeps on crying. And finally, she tugs again and says, "Mother." Mother just keeps on crying. And finally, "Mother, please, please." Mother looks up out of tear-stained eyes and said, "Please what?" "Please take me back." And Royal House said, and that's the church. Outside of our doors, there go hundreds and thousands of people who in one way or another are crying, "Please take me back, please take me back." But we're indifferent to them. We think we have nothing to offer them. And so we go in and shut our doors. The chaplains, the priests settle down to minister to the faithful, and the faithful just settle down. And outside these doors are millions of people who in one way or another are crying, "Please take me back." And so the priest chants by the road, and the church has missed a great opportunity, but God bless it, the church is re-examining its views all along the line. Strong programs are being initiated now to attack this program of alcoholism and temperance from a different angle. Not that negative angle of don't, but do. Do become interested. Do know what it is all about. Do what you can to help. Don't judge. Don't set yourself up in judgment. Don't play God, you little bit of man, with your pious prattling of platitudes on Sunday morning. You're babbling of biblical bedtime stories that are fit for the kindergarten, but if the love of Christ in your heart, step out there and say, "Here am I. What can I do for you?" Then the next character we meet coming down the road is the Levite. He passed on the other side too. He's familiar character to us. We know him. He's your deacon, your steward, your vestryman, your presbyter. He sits on your official board. He vetoes everything that comes up. He won't come to church, but he's going to tell you how to spend the church's money. He's going to tell the preacher what to preach. Not that he's going to come there to listen to him, but he's going to tell him what to say. He wears his religion on his sleeve for everybody to see. His letterhead says steward or deacon of such and such a church or vestryman, and he has it on his stationery, and everybody knows. Oh, there's Mr. Joe Blow, he's big man in the church. There's a story, which is so definitive and so illustrative of this type of churchman. of this country storekeeper who was a big man in his church, and it's 8 o'clock at night, and he calls down to the hired man. He said, "Si," he said, "did you close the door?" He said, "Yes, sir." "Did you put water in the milk?" "Yes, sir." "Put sand in the sugar?" "Yes, sir." "Well, let's come up now. It's time to pray." Then the third man we meet, the third character coming down the line, is the Samaritan. See, he's the man, he's the woman from across the tracks. He doesn't belong to our society. Maybe his color is different. Maybe his nationality is different. Maybe his religious faith is different. He doesn't wear the nice clothes we wear. He's from the other side of the street, from the other side of town. But he's been in hell himself. He suffered. He suffered, and he knows what compassion is. He knows what it is to be down there, lying, bleeding to death. He knows the grace of a drop of cold water on parched lips. He knows the necessity of a drink when a man or a woman is lying there in the shakes, and who can get around his peculiar scruples and see the need of first things first. And he comes along and he helps him. He's the AA who makes this 12-step call. See, the trouble is that we don't really try to understand the ways of God. We just rather, as I said before, play God. We're setting ourselves up as judges over our fallen brother man. Little people playing God. Our praying is so symbolic of what I'm talking about, isn't it? We're not praying. We're just wheedling, trying to wheedle something out of God. Oh, I loved that last night. Somebody said, when you start the day out and you say, "God, just this day, not eternity, just this day, let me stay sober." For heaven's sakes, if you stayed sober all day long, don't you think the decent thing to do tomorrow night is to go to God and say, "Thank you for letting me stay sober this day. Tomorrow, let's talk about it again." But you see, our praying isn't like that at all. Our praying is telling God what to do. In 1951, I was down in Georgia, and they had a terrible drought. It was pitiful. I walked through fields where there wasn't an ear of corn. Cattle they were just trying to import was dying out there on the ground. For want of water, you could get $1 a piece. So they decided to have a prayer meeting for rain, and so they called a prayer meeting in this little church, and they had one of these eloquent women in there who would just, oh man, she could just talk and she could pray at the drop of a hat, and she'd bring her own hat if nobody else had one. Somebody said to her, "Sister Effie, would you pray for rain?" So she got up and prayed, and before she got through, the skies opened up and it poured. Oh, it poured for 5 days and 5 nights, and they thought a second sin flood had started, and they had to have another prayer meeting. So they called another prayer meeting. Sister Effie got up and she said, "Lord, 5 days ago we asked you for rain, but this is ridiculous." So we go along in our impotent way, telling God what to do, rather than coming as did Isaiah, that great statesman, that son of a royal family who had the ear of kings and councils, sitting in his church all alone one morning with the vast complexities of the Assyrian Empire coming down upon him, trying to absorb his little kingdom which he loved so dearly, and then seeing himself for the impotent creature he was, as he saw the majesty, the magnificence of God there. You read this beautiful description in the 6th chapter of the book of Isaiah. The day the king of Zion died, I saw the Lord high and mighty. Then the Lord said, whom shall I send, and who will go for me? And then I said, here am I. Here am I. Send me. Send me. Someone once said that there's some people who try to cram all eternity into 1 hour. And some people wait and think they have all eternity before they have to get things right and make things right with God. You know, this isn't a pleasant subject, but you can't avoid it. You're going to die. You're going to die. Some of you haven't got long. You haven't got much more time. And the wonderful thing about these conventions is that you always talk to people and say, Dutch, if I just had faith. Let me say this to you. In all sincerity, there are people sitting out here who have more faith than I have. Tennyson said it. There is more faith in honest doubt, believe me, than in all the creeds. The only man, the only woman I'm afraid of is that man or that woman who's got all the faith in the world and whom you can't tell anything. They've had it. I think we better pray for them. But so we go on, you see, just 24 hours at a time. This verse was found on a sundial someplace, and I hope I can recollect it. But it goes something like that: the shadow by thy finger cast divides the future from the past. Behind its unreturning line, the day that's gone, no longer thine. Before it is the unborn hour, in darkness and beyond your power. The only time at your command, then now, on which the shadow stands. 24 hours at a time. We've got to be wary of that Jericho road, because we are constantly threatening to walk on it, and we know the robbers are on there waiting for us. The most subtle one we haven't met yet. He's waiting for us after we've got rid of all the rest of them. That's the one of self-confidence. That's the one that says to you, how you've been sober a long time and you can take a drink now. This is my second visit to Cincinnati. I'm running way over my time, and if you feel like you want to get up and go out, go ahead. You won't offend me. I told you, man, a few thousand words. But you paid for me to come down here. You might as well get your money's worth. When you had enough, get up. Go out, see? But this is my second visit to Cincinnati. This one I enjoy. This one I remember. The first one I came here in an Army troop train. Not really a troop train. I came on my first furlough. I got into the station down here in Cincinnati, and I went down into the cafeteria for breakfast. I had not had a drop of drink, neither whiskey nor beer nor anything alcoholic for 9 months, you see. During the stage of my drinking, when I had realized that I had reached the stage that it was a problem with me, I also resolved to solve it my own way. I was a genius, and I didn't need AA or anybody telling me what to do about the thing. It was simply a question of mind over matter. You just isolate yourself from the stuff, and you've got it made. So 9 months in the Army, I don't drink anything, and I said, no, I told you I was right. I knew what I was doing. And I got to Cincinnati, and I got into the coffee in the cafeteria in the morning, and I looked up, and the first thing I saw was Scotch and bourbon and Paul Jones and this and that, and I sat there looking at the thing, and 100 soldiers sitting all around me. And I said, now you've been a good boy. For 9 months you didn't take a drink, and for heaven's sakes you've certainly earned a little reward for all the tough things you've been through, and one can't do you any harm. Go on and blow yourself. And by the time the waitress came over, "Soldier, what'll you have?" And I said, "Bring me a double scotch." And a little while later, she came back with a double scotch, and 100 soldiers' mouth began to drool. There is a soldier that really knows how to order breakfast. Well, I remember coming into the Cincinnati station, but I don't remember leaving it. I don't remember anything else about the thing. Next time I came around was when they poured me off the train after my furlough was over with back in Junction City, Kansas. This insidious last robber we got to get by. This one that keeps telling us now, this self-confidence. You're all right now. You've been sober long enough. Now remember, don't drink gin, bring bourbon. Don't mix them. You see what I mean? We go out of our way to complicate matters so terribly much. We become despaired because we come to AA program and then things don't happen immediately like we want them. One man, he said, "Here I am, 6 months sober. Where's my Cadillac?" We come to this program and all of a sudden God just doesn't want to overwhelm us with His presence, and we become disturbed. And I've never yet been to one of these things that somebody doesn't come up to me and say, "Dutch, I can get everything about the thing. I can't get the spiritual program. I have no faith." Well, the very fact that you're even thinking about it is an indication of your faith. Why not wait? I said, "How long have you been in the program?" 6 months. But come back to me and talk to me in 6 years from now. First things first. The thing that I'm pleading with, the thing that I've got to say, the thing that AA said is this. Pursue this. Pursue this at the pace and at the rate at which you can absorb it, but don't dismiss this from your program. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Don't say, "This I don't like, I don't want, I'll take the rest of it." You'll be like some of my people in my group up in Lynchburg. You'd be drunk Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, so you can come back Monday night and tell us why you were drunk Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. You have to accept the rest of our program if you really want happiness. You won't be sober until you accept it all, and that's what I meant when I said at the start that so many have taken off on tangents in these AA groups, leading off into clubs and away from the original program of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is not a religion, is not affiliated with religion, does not endorse any religion or political association or civic or fraternal organization, but which has a spiritual power running all the way through it from the first step to the last. Remember, Christ said, "And whosoever cometh unto me, I will in no wise cast out." Isn't that wonderful? Nobody so black in sin, so degenerate in alcoholism, the love of God can reach down and get him or her and bring him back out and set him back up on top of the pinnacle of the world. Let them feel the fulfillment and the happiness of joy such as only we know in this program and such as we have had here at this meeting. It's been a joy to have been with you, a privilege. I apologize if I've kept you too long. I'm sorry. Sometimes I get carried away with this thing, and since I am the last speaker in this all, God bless you, and thanks for having me.